Many people may not recognize the name Vince Gironda, but many do remember hearing the name Vince's Gym. This is because Vince's Gym became a cultural landmark in North Hollywood, California. While it didn't get the accolades and fanfare that Gold's Gym received, it was arguably the most important gym in the world for bodybuilders. And that's because the namesake of the gym, Vince Gironda himself, was there every day training his pupils to be their absolute best. Starting in 1948 and lasting all the way to 1995, Vince's Gym was a virtual celebrity hotspot. Vince trained many famous clients right there at the gym. There was no other place like it on earth. In fact, on any given day of the week, you might bump into stars like Clint Eastwood, James Garner, Carl Weathers, Tommy Chong of Cheech and Chong, Sean Penn, and Eric Estrada. Vince became famous not just as a bodybuilder, but as a body sculptor. That is why starting in the 60s through the 80s, Hollywood sent their leading men and ladies to him to get in shape for upcoming roles. Remember how absolutely jacked Carl Weathers looked playing Apollo Creed? You can thank Vince Gironda. Now, if all Vince did at his gym was train movie stars, that would be more than enough to earn him a high-ranking position in the world of personal trainers. But he did so much more than that. In the early 1960s, a young man named Larry Scott entered Vince's gym. Vince didn't think too much of him at first. He wasn't very big and didn't seem to have the kind of frame or build that would be good for a pro bodybuilder. But Vince saw his dedication and that he showed up every single day and did whatever he was told. That's when Vince concocted his plan. He would turn Larry Scott into a champion. They trained for several years together, gearing up for the first ever Mr. Olympia competition. Basically the Super Bowl of bodybuilding competitions. Larry had smaller arms, so Vince had to create a strategy to make his arms look massive. He personally built a new bicep exercise just for Larry. You may have heard of this exercise before. People started calling it the preacher curl. You see, Vince was a mad scientist when it came to experimenting with the human body. He built every machine in the gym himself, many of which are now commonplace in gyms all over the world. And when it comes to nutrition, he was 50 years ahead of everyone else. Ever heard of the keto diet? Vince was teaching keto back in the 1950s. He wrote a whole pamphlet about the importance of eating steak and eggs. He even predicted that scientists and nutritionists had eggs all wrong. He was proven right when more than 50 years later, we are finally being told that eggs are good for us again. And believe it or not, red meat is making a comeback now too. Vince was so far ahead of his time that his competitors and enemies would spread lies that he was crazy and to avoid Vince's gym at all costs because he was peddling pseudoscience. Well, many of the naysayers had no choice but to eat their words on September 18, 1965. You see, that was the day that Larry Scott stepped on the stage at the first ever Mr. Olympia. When he first walked out, people paused and just stared. They had never seen a body like that before. His arms were massive. His chest was a perfect V shape, the kind we all dream of having. His golden locks flowed almost as if they were in the wind. Someone in the crowd screamed, "He's a Greek god!" And the crowd of spectators proceeded to cheer the entire time Larry performed his routine. You couldn't hear anything but the sounds of screaming and chanting, "Larry, Larry, Larry." When the dust had settled, Larry was crowned the first ever Mr. Olympia, and he won again the next year before deciding to retire. One of Vince's students ran to the phone to call Vince back in California to let him know what happened. The story goes that when Vince heard Larry had not only won, but demolished the competition, he broke down crying. Vindication! He never won a championship himself, but he had trained the greatest bodybuilding champion in the world. And remember, this is long before the days of steroids and chemicals. Some say Vince cried because he was sad he never had the chance to win. Others say it's because he was so proud of Larry. But knowing Vince, he cried because he knew the naysayers couldn't say anything anymore about his crazy methods. Vince and Vince's Gym became famous that day in 1965. Bodybuilders and movie stars the world over would flock to his gym. People like the Hulk, Lou Ferrigno, another Mr. Olympia, Frank Zane, and even a very young, pudgy-faced Arnold Schwarzenegger. Vince's Gym closed up in 1995, making it almost 50 years. Vince died less than 2 years later, in part because his precious gym was gone. Though Vince died in 1997, his legacy lives on to this day.